Hello, everybody. My name is Miriam Foom, and I am RC's Antiquities Endowment Fund Grants Administrator and your host for this tutorial. I'm actually very excited about this tutorial. It's the first time we've done one for the AEF Grants program, and hopefully you'll agree as well. Coming out of this, you will hopefully find it much easier to put together your application and proceed with your submission with ease. Now, this tutorial or webinar is both to talk you through the application process and give suggestions on what you might need to do to have a hopefully successful application. The AEF program was initially introduced in 2004, and as of 2020, RC has had 18 AEF grant cycles, having awarded funding to a total of 194 projects and over $8 million over the years in funding. Now, I'd like to start off by giving you a little bit of background on our AEF grant program before we get into how to successfully put together your application. Created by an endowment from the United States Agency for International Development, RC's Antiquities Endowment Fund sustains an ongoing grant program awarded to highly focused professional projects that serve the conservation, excavation, preservation, documentation, and cultural heritage needs of Egyptian antiquities that are more than 100 years old. Has to be more than 100 years old. The AEF grant program supports the conservation, excavation, investigation, preservation, and documentation of Egypt's cultural heritage and the dissemination of relevant knowledge in this field. Now, the AEF grant program is split into two types, the short-term grant and the long-term grant. The short-term grant is awarded to grants to projects with a duration of 1 year or less, and is split into four funding categories. One, conservation, excavation, preservation, and presentation. Two, training of Egyptian personnel. Three, student training. And four, publication subsidies. I'll get into these four later on in more details. And for the long-term grant, it's awarded to larger projects with a duration of up to 3 years. So they have to be more than 1 year long, but cannot exceed 3 years. And the long-term grant type only has one category, that is the conservation, excavation, preservation, and presentation category. Now I'll be getting into more details of the four funding categories under the short-term grant, starting off with the first one, the conservation, excavation, preservation, and presentation category. Projects that apply under this category can receive funding of up to $100,000. The category supports the conservation, excavation, and preservation of Egyptian sites, structures, or objects dating from prehistory to 100 years ago. Again, 100 years. And projects may include this long list of protecting partial or entire sites, specific elements at a site or site management activities, preservation, conservation, and presentation of artifacts, works of art, monuments or parts of monuments, ancient manuscripts, books, or other related material, photographic, digital, or other documentation or cataloging of sites, structures, or objects. The list is long. There are infinite options. The projects must take place in Egypt. They can't be anywhere else in the world. The second category under the short-term grant is, like we mentioned before, the training of Egyptian personnel category. And this has a funding limit of $75,000. Funding of this category supports basically training, excavation, conservation, and preservation to Egyptian personnel. The funding of this category supports field schools, museum management, site management, on-the-job conservation training, and basically training, excavation, conservation, and preservation to Egyptian personnel. The training or project that you will be requesting funding for must serve an identified need and or address a gap in existing skills or knowledge in this field. The training, once again, has to take place in Egypt, and trainees must be Egyptian nationals in this category. And the maximum number of trainees per field school is 15. The third category, student training, is similar to the one that we just discussed, the second category, but the only difference is the grant fund is for funding for training advanced students under expeditions approved by RC. Funding in this category can reach up to 25,000, and projects applying for this category must specify the type of work that will be done and the specific training program. Once again, all training must take place in Egypt, and students must be enrolled in an accredited American or Egyptian institution of higher education. The maximum number of participants per field school under this category is 8. Please make sure to remember that if you're applying under this category. The final funding category under the short-term grant is the publication subsidies category, with funding that can reach up to 30,000. Funding under this category supports publication of completed manuscripts and preparation of specialist materials for publication manuscripts. RC does put those that are publishing projects that further the AEF mission as a priority, but anyone is free to apply. Applicants who plan on requesting funding under this category can have to include documentation of an appropriate press indicating acceptance of the manuscript in its final form and an anticipated date of publication in their application submission. As I mentioned before, the AEF grant program is split into 2 types. The long-term grant is the second and was actually only just introduced in the previous 2020 grant cycle. We're actually very excited to having introduced this category because we found a lot of projects, interesting projects that actually need to go to work beyond 1 year. So we decided to introduce this category last year or in the last round. Projects that apply for funding under this grant are actually similar to that of the short-term grant of the same category: conservation, excavation, preservation, and presentation. The main difference is that, once again, these projects would be on a larger scale that require more than a year to fulfill, but not exceed 3 years. And the funding limitation for this category is $300,000 for the 3 years, not per year. The long-term grant supports the conservation, excavation, and preservation of Egyptian sites, structures, or objects dating from prehistory to 100 years ago, once again. And the projects may include exactly the same list that we mentioned in the short-term grant of this category. Once again, projects must take place in Egypt. They can't take place outside Egypt. I'll now get into more specifics on the actual AEF application, starting off with the eligibility. Applicants are eligible to apply for AEF funding if they are either from an institution of higher education, museums, freelance researchers, public or private organizations, or finally from the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities in Egypt. If an applicant is from the ministry, if awarded a grant, that applicant would need to take a leave of absence from their position at the ministry for the duration of the grant, and of course, provide RC with a copy of the leave. I would suggest mentioning your awareness of this condition in your application if you in fact are currently employed at the ministry and will be applying for an AEF grant. Applicants are ineligible if they were awarded an AEF grant in a prior cycle and haven't completed the project for which funds were received or submitted all the required deliverables. They would also be ineligible if they are a current member of RC's Board of Governors or the AEF committee. It's important that applicants make sure that they are RC members at the time of application, and I'll get into this more later on. Of course, it goes without saying that applicants of any country are welcome to apply. For your final application submission, you're required to provide the following 7 documents or items. Number 1, the project abstract, which is 100 to 150 words. Number two, confirmation of any previous or current grant received by the principal investigator or project director. Three, the source of additional funding for the project you're requesting funding for. Four, the CVs of the PI or project director and project members who would be recipients of funds. Basically, the main team members of the project. And the other three items are the project narrative, basically your main project proposal, the budget form, and the participant salary history form, which I'll get into in the coming slides. Now, the project narrative, I would say, is the most important piece of your application. It's your project proposal. It's basically your whole pitch. It must be written in English. We won't accept a narrative written in Arabic or any other language, obviously, and must provide a description of the following, starting with the project activities, including set objectives and implementation timeline, defined chronologically. For the short-term grant, this must be accomplished in a single fiscal year, and for the long-term grant, the timeline would cover set activities for 3 years. Your narrative should also include the project anticipated outputs, results, and impacts. What do you plan on accomplishing at the end of this project? This is basically what you need to put into it in the second point. In the case of projects that include conservation or preservation work, your project narrative has to include a condition report or assessment, a survey of what is to be conserved or preserved. For example, if it's a group of objects or anything else. A treatment proposal that includes details of conservation techniques and material to be used. And in this case, a slightly longer narrative defining the methodologies, including details of methodology and legitimation of any chemicals used. Your project narrative has to also include a section on the roles and responsibilities of the project director and other project funded recipients. Again, the main team members, including description of their intellectual input, their expertise, resources, basically what each individual will contribute to the project and how they will support particular outputs, outcomes, and intended impacts. Basically justify the reason as to why these specific members were chosen and will be receiving funds or a salary that you will include in the budget form we will discuss later on. A sustainability plan is one of the most important points we look for in a strong application. How will the outcomes you mentioned be sustained beyond the project timeframe? RC aims on ensuring that AEF funding makes a long-term impact beyond the timeframe of the project it funds and not just during the period of the project itself. How the project is clearly differentiated from the ongoing work of the project director's mission with distinctive personnel, activities, and timing is important to mention as well. And a risk assessment must be included in your narrative, identifying the risks associated with carrying out the project and how you plan on addressing them. For example, safety, security, how are you planning on addressing these risks and so on, if there are any other risks that come with proceeding with your project. Your project narrative isn't complete without photos showing the nature and condition of the site or collection or the urgency or need for the project and funding. Try and include at least 5 photographs that showcase your project and specifically the need for the work that you're proposing in your proposal. For you to have a strong application, you need to make sure to cover these 8 points we've just discussed. Your project narrative isn't complete if you do not cover these 8 points in detail. Now, the budget form. It's actually very easy to fill. Don't get intimidated by how it looks. It's very simple. It's split into 6 sections: salaries and wages, travel and subsistence, supplies and materials, publication, services, and finally, other direct costs. I'd like to stress that AEF grants don't cover indirect costs, purchasing of equipment of any kind, or honoraria. All amounts have to be in US dollars. And you start off, number one, by filling in your project title, which is very easy. And then under salaries and wages, in this column on your left, you would delete these red highlighted instructions. And for example, your main team members who will be receiving a salary, plug in their names and positions. And for wages of other non-essential or non-key personnel, like for example, workers, you can just plug in as a number and the description. So for example, your main team member would be Smith, and then you'd put a dash archaeologist, which is his position. And then you can have for the non-key personnel, the number, which would be, for example, if you're having 10 workers, you would put that here. Under unit cost, and you will plug in the cost of their service or the salary or wages amount. And under quantity, you'll plug in the number of days or months they will be working. Just specify in brackets whether the quantity is in days or months, so we're aware. And the final column goes without saying is the total, which would be the multiplication of the unit cost and the quantity. So yeah, it's important to know that like these salaries and wages you mentioned need to align with the team members you mentioned in your proposal and the time frame you've provided. So you cannot add like an essential personnel here and give him a salary if you haven't included that person under the roles and responsibilities or the team members in your proposal. As well as you cannot add here or exceed the number of days or months that you have put in your proposal. If the project or this specific person will be working for 3 months, then the quantity can't exceed 3 months and be 6. We check these things very carefully. Now, under travel and subsistence, we've provided examples of the format you should use while plugging in the description. This section has been split into 3 subsections: airfare, lodging, and local transportation. It goes without saying, amounts included in this budget section, if any, must be specifically for the individuals to get to and from the project location, lodging near the project. It can't be anything that is not related to the project itself. Under airfare, for example, you have here New York, Cairo, New York, return Smith. You can put in your specific locations or destinations where your team members are coming from and where the project will be carried out, and then their names in brackets so we know whose airfare this is for. Under unit cost, you'd put the cost of the airfare, and depending on the time frame, some people might make this trip several times. This is something you must anticipate, and if so, plug it in under quantity to get the total. Under lodging, you list the type of expense by traveler's name and duration. For example, again, lodging, Smith, and the date. And then unit quantity and unit cost, quantity, and total are self-explanatory. Local transportation, self-explanatory as well. If any, just provide the description here on the left, and on the right, you'd put in the unit cost, quantity, and total. The same goes for supplies and materials. You will fill in the description here on the left as per the examples we've given, and then the unit cost and the quantity and the total here on the right. If there are any publication costs, you mention it under this section, obviously, with the description once again on the left, and then on the right, you would put the cost and quantity. This section is usually filled only by those applying for funding under the publication subsidy category. We don't usually get people putting in amounts in this section if they're applying for other categories. Under services, we've also given examples such as rental, translation fees, and accounting services. Any services would fall under this section of the budget form. Like I said, we don't allow for people to purchase equipment, but if you want to rent equipment, you would put it in here, and then you would put the cost, quantity, and total here. Finally, under the other direct cost section, you can include costs such as photocopying, insurance. Again, we've given examples, and the RC administrative fee has been plugged in for you already, which is compulsory for all projects, and the fee is $1,000. You have to account for this when you're sorry, I went to the next slide. You have to account for this administrative fee when you're putting together your budget. The funding cap includes this $1,000 fee. So it's not, for example, if you're applying for the first category of conservation, excavation, and so on, and the funding limitation is $100,000, it wouldn't be $101,000 because this is an administrative fee that needs to be included in your budget. Just make sure to remove these examples we've given you and plug in your information, because we tend to see applicants just include their descriptions under these examples. That doesn't look, it kind of gets confusing when we're looking at it. You can find this budget form on our website, rc.org, under the grants page. And what we've discussed is for the short-term grant. Now, the budget form for the long-term grant is exactly the same as that of the short-term grant that we just went through. The only difference is now you're allocating the budget for 3 fiscal years instead of 1. And everything else will be the same. The different sections in the budget form are the same, and you fill it in the same exact way. The other difference is the RC administrative fee that is compulsory is $2,751 spread across 3 years at an amount of $917 per year. And this cost has already been plugged in for you. Now, the participant salary history form should be filled in for the main team members that will be receiving a salary, and that is included under the salary section in the budget form. This isn't filled in for non-key personnel like workers and so on, but just the main team members. And these main team members, again, that are included in your budget form should be the same ones that are included in your project narrative. So it all has to align. A separate form for each member has to be filled out. You can't fill out this form for all your members under this one form. Fill in the project title and then project participant name in the order mentioned, which is last, first, and middle name, the individual's address, position under the project, which you have mentioned in the project narrative. It has to be the same. Again, it has to all align. And the salary requested, which you've mentioned in your budget form as well, it has to be the same. Under employment history, you will give the individual's employment history for the last 3 years, including the position title, the employer's name and address, the date of employment, and the salary that was given, including the currency. Under the justification for the amount of salary requested, that is basically the justification you provided in your project narrative for including this person in your project. And this form, you can actually find it on our website as well. Now, we've discussed in details how to compile all the needed documents for the AEF grant application. and the requirements. I'm now just gonna walk you through how to submit your actual application and all of these documents. This is the final step. So you're required to submit your final application on the submittable platform along with a very short online application form. You go to grants, you can go to our grants page using the address www.rc.org/grants. And when you scroll down, you'll find this black button. Click here to submit, which will direct you to the submittable platform and directly to the page with the online forms at the bottom for the short-term and the long-term form. And this is what it looks like. You can click on the application of your choice and proceed. The short and long-term online forms are similar. I'll start off by just walking you through the short-term online form and later on show you the difference in the long-term form. You start off by filling in the name of the principal investigator. I assume the person that will be submitting this application is the principal investigator or the project director. So you start off by filling in your name and then uploading your CV by clicking on choose files. You have to make sure that your CV is a PDF, otherwise it won't upload. The mailing address should be that of the principal investigator or yours, and must include this information: the street address, the city, state, country, and postal code. Please make sure this is correct because this is what we're going to be using. Hopefully, if you get granted a funding, this will be used in your contracts and so on. The phone number and email address is self-explanatory, just fill them in. Again, it has to be of the project director or the principal investigator. The affiliation as well is that of the project director or principal investigator, where it's the university, institute, or museum you are affiliated with, or that is affiliated with your project in Egypt. I mentioned before, to be eligible for an AEF grant, you have to be an RC member. And you just click here to confirm if you are already an RC member. If you're not, you can email me at this address over here so that we can get this sorted out and create your membership, either activate it or renew it, whichever you need. You continue by filling in the title of the project and then choosing your funding category that you're applying for. These buttons sometimes lag, so make sure you click several times. If you click the first time and it doesn't select, it's just an issue. Like, it's not a problem. Just keep clicking and it will eventually select the category that you want. You plug in your project abstract that we talked about here, and then after plugging that in, you can upload your project narrative or your project proposal that you should already have put together before clicking on this online form to submit. We already included here just the 8 points that we discussed, just in case you want to make sure that you covered all the points, but I'm sure by now you'd be confident in uploading your project narrative. So you choose the file and make sure that it is, once again, a PDF. It won't upload if it's not a PDF. We've also put in a section for you to upload supporting images. You can upload up to 10 photos and they must be JPEGs of 300 DPI quality. So the more photos, I know in our project narrative, we said you can put in at least 5 photos. Here you have up to 10 to showcase your project as much as you want. The next question you'll find on the form is, has your project received any other funding? Previous funding and current funding apply. If you select yes, this section here of funding history will drop down. and you'll need to provide this document, which was mentioned earlier in the list. If you select no, this whole section will not appear for you, and you can proceed with the remaining of the remainder of the form. Now, for the budget worksheet, this is the one that we discussed. There are two ways you can download this budget worksheet. You can either go to our website on rc.org, and under the grants page, you'll find the budget worksheet, and you can download either for in this case, the short-term budget worksheet, or you can press this word here, link, and it will automatically download for you. You just upload it here. Again, you have to make sure that it's a PDF. So when you download the budget worksheet and you fill it up, it's actually an Excel sheet, but you will have to convert it into a PDF to be able to actually upload it here. The budget summary narrative is basically where you provide the funding amount requested and the general totals of the different sections in your budget, with basically a short statement on what they will cover. The total amount requested is self-explanatory. That is the funding amount that you are requesting for your project. Just make sure that your funding amount aligns with the limitations of each category you're applying for. So if it's the first category, the funding limitation is 100,000, you can't request an amount for more than that. If it's the second one, it's 75,000, you can request for an amount more than that, and it goes on that way. So just make sure the amount you requested is logical. The next question, are salaries of any project member included in your budget? It's self-explanatory. However, if you pick yes, you will be asked to, this whole section will drop down and you'll be asked to provide their CVs and the participant salary history forms that we discussed. If you select no, this whole section won't appear for you. And you can find the participant salary history form again on our website, or you can click link here to download it. Again, CVs have to be in PDF format, and the participant salary history form that you download and fill is an Excel sheet as well. So you're gonna have to convert it to a PDF to be able to upload it. Everything here is either a PDF or in the case of the photos, it's a JPEG. So you have to make sure that your format is the same as the one that we're requesting here, or the file type, to be able to upload. Finally, you have to acknowledge that you have read and understood RC's AEF grant policies and procedures and agree to abide by them. Hopefully by now you have properly read the guidelines and policies. You just click here and you can either submit if you're feeling comfortable, or you can save your online form as a draft and get back to it later. Now, the long-term online form is exactly the same as the short-term form. I just guided you through. The only difference is, since, like we discussed, there's only one category, you will choose the one. There's no other option. And there's an additional question as to whether or not your project includes a training aspect within the scope of work. If you select yes, you'll be asked, this whole section will drop down again, and you'll be asked to specify the number of trainees. And in this case, it's there's a maximum of 15 trainees, and you'll be asked to provide their identification. If you select no, this whole section won't appear for you, and then you can proceed with filling in the rest of the form, and it's exactly the same questions or requirements as the short-term online form. Now, over the years, these are the questions that were frequently asked, and I just thought I'd go through them so to save you the hassle, or just so you know before emailing. How many grants do you award per year? RC doesn't actually have a specified limit or cap to how many projects can be awarded grants, but RC awards grants based on quality and quantity of the application pool, and of course the RC's available budget at the time. who is responsible for the awarding decision. RC's AEF committee, made up of cultural heritage experts and professionals in the fields of archaeology and Egyptology, come together to discuss and evaluate all applications submitted and are responsible for the awarding decision. It is not me, I am just your grants administrator. When the applicants receive final results of the AEF application cycle, an applicant receives a decision letter on whether or not they will receive AEF funding for their project by the first week of May. And in this case, for this round, it's the first week of May 2021. Now, decision letters aren't sent by email. They are actually sent through the same platform, Submittable, that you submitted your application on. So you'll receive an email notification that a letter was sent to you on the platform, and you can just log into your Submittable platform and check your letter to see the decision that was given to you. How do you sign up or renew your RC membership? For non-Egyptians, you can renew or sign up for your membership on our website on www.rc.org/membership. For Egyptian members, you'll need to visit our Cairo office to sign up or renew. We unfortunately don't have the online payment option or membership activation for Egyptian members for now. We're still working on it, and maybe in the next round we might have that already applied. Can you apply for 2 categories in a single round? Unfortunately, you cannot. You can only apply as a project director for one project, because it doesn't make sense if you apply as a project director for more than one project, and for some reason the AEF committee decides wants to award the project, they can't award it to the same person to work at the same time in 1 year. It's just not possible or feasible. You can, however, be a team member in other applying projects. So you can be a project director or principal investigator in one and submit your application for your project, for your one project, but you can be part of other projects as a team member. Do you need to have an institution that you are affiliated with to submit the project? Yes, you must be affiliated with an institution at the time of application and duration of the project should you be awarded a grant. Now, just a couple of reminders I think that are important to highlight. The most important one is the deadlines. Draft submissions are due December 20th, 2020, 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. Please make sure that you email your draft on aef@rc.org and not actually submit it on the platform. The platform is strictly for final application submissions. You're also not obligated to submit a draft. If you're confident with the guidelines and application process, you can skip this deadline and concentrate on putting in your final application and your final submission. But we do give applicants the option of emailing drafts if they would like earlier feedback or to make sure their application meets the guidelines or requirements. So it's your choice. Final application is to be submitted through Submittable online platform that we just ran through. And the deadline for this is February 15th, 2021, 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. Applications won't be accepted if they're emailed for the final application. So February 15th, you cannot email your final application. You have to submit it on the platform correctly. I've also provided these quick links, which we've mentioned throughout the tutorial, and it's basically all the sources you need for your AEF application, including the RC AEF page on our website where you can find downloadable forms and guidelines, and the submittable link for the online submission and the link for membership information. Finally, if you're interested or would like to reach out to any RC staff or myself, here are our contact details. Um, Thank you for taking the time to sit through this tutorial or webinar, and I really hope it proved useful and brings clarity to the AEF application process. Um, I would really love your feedback. If you actually sat through this tutorial and have any feedback, just email me at any time. If you have more questions, you can email me at any time. Hopefully I've covered and answered all your questions in the tutorial, but if I haven't, email me at any time, that's fine. Good luck on your applications. Feel free to reach out whenever you want. Thank you, and again, good luck.